If you like our videos, don't forget to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And thanks again to all who have donated to us via our PayPal link. In this video, we will try to understand the meaning of postmodernity. Is it merely a reaction against modernity or a completely new world view? Rather than trying to reveal the truth in order to restore justice, the characters in modernist and existential films cry for lack of justice or the difficulty of attaining it, since even the social engineering of modernity failed. And according to Kovács, the characters in postmodernist films went further and stopped believing that the truth exists and that justice can be attained. The existentialists used minimalism in order to make the absence of their humanistic values more present in their work. And the postmodernists used any artistic tool and technique they could think of, since any expression is not an opportunity to tell truth or lie statements to begin with, to judge, but to fabricate, to structure a reality with the use of signs. This is why in these films behind any fiction, lie, there is another fiction, lie.
I call it fiction.
Romantics, conservatives, and religious fanatics hold on to transcendent truths out of the fear of loss and the desire for permanence. Romantic poets, for example, following Plato's Ion, believed that only a few artists could have true inspiration and let the divine speak through them, to be possessed by the absolute. For the postmodernists, on the other hand, art is a way to celebrate the transient and the meaningless. Moreover, violence for the postmodernist is no longer only the means by which human beings can protect their bodies, ideas, and gods, but something beautiful in itself. Postmodern art, then, frees itself from the moral and truthful altogether. Any creative endeavor is valuable for the postmodern movement, which in effect also diminishes the difference between low and high cultures. This gave Quentin Tarantino the artistic permission to put most of his directorial efforts on the surface of the screen, choreographing aesthetic violence and constructing a colorful dialogue. And it leads him to argue in his films that the meaning of justice is retribution, a violent religious eye for an eye revenge, rather than punishment for unjust acts, restoration, rehabilitation, or trying to prevent cases of injustice from happening again by making social and cultural changes, such as having a more just distribution of wealth or legislating social programs and more just laws. The contempt of the so-called postmodernist movement led to the revival of surrealism by directors such as David Lynch, for whom any expectation for closure in the plot just leads to another foreclosure to understand it. And to French directors such as Bruno Dumont, Gaspar Noé, and Philippe Grandier to emphasize the brute side of human beings in order to be attached to earth as much as possible and leave behind the fantasy of modernity. For Harmony Korine, both those who still have hopes in humanistic values, or God-given values, and those who are deeply disappointed with their failure or absence, are missing the party. Over the years, Korine dealt less with pain, with memory and realism, and more with pleasure, with forgetfulness and fantasy.
Hey y'all, those are my brothers and sisters. They dead. They in jail. I'm the last one. I don't know what it is, we just bad. It's just in our blood. But I don't care. I feel good when I do the wrong thing. Look at this. You got money. This is the dream, y'all. Some kids, they want to be president. They think that's the American dream. They want to be doctors. They want families. I don't give a fuck about all that. I just care about money. I just care about being bad, y'all. That's it. Since I was born. Just in my blood, y'all.
He seems to be arguing that today, the United States is the place where the West finally shamelessly jettisons its values, and instead enjoys the fruits of corruption. After all, the American way of life is to live with as few limits as possible. Corinne's films use fireworks and neon colors in order to celebrate the absence of truth and justice, rather than introducing virtuous characters that can save the day. This strategy was always the American way of dealing with its hedonism, libertarianism, and obsession with innovation that empties its traditions and myths.
So that was Mrs. Lundegaard on the floor in there. And I guess that was your accomplice and the wood chipper. And those 3 people in Brainerd. And for what? For a little bit of money. There's more to life than a little money, you know. Don't you know that? And here you are. And it's a beautiful day.
Instead of following the hero's journey, the audience stares at bright and disappearing colors that are meant to distract them from dealing with moral questions. The hopeless mood of the postmodern movement led Sofia Coppola to make films about lost characters in a meaningless world who gave up and didn't even try to find themselves again, as the characters in Michelangelo Antonioni's films about modern alienation do. And to Woody Allen and Lars von Trier to make faithless films with possessed and obsessed characters all around the world.
Where are you?
Even cynicism became in vogue. In the first season of the HBO series True Detective, Rust Cole, a cynical detective, tries to crush the faith in the good and the just his partner Marty Hart holds onto in order to get by in his harsh reality.
I think human consciousness was a tragic misstep in evolution. We became too self-aware. Nature created an aspect of nature separate from itself. We are creatures that should not exist by natural law.
Well, that sounds god-fucking awful, Rust.
We are things that labor under the illusion of having a self, this accretion of sensory experience and feeling. Programmed with total assurance that we are each somebody, when in fact everybody's nobody.
I wouldn't go around spouting that shit I was you. People around here don't think that way. I don't think that way.
I think the honorable thing for our species to do is deny our programming. Stop reproducing. Walk hand in hand into extinction. One last midnight, brothers and sisters opting out of a raw deal.
So, what's the point of getting out of bed in the morning?
I tell myself I bear witness. The real answer is that it's obviously my programming.
And Jean-Luc Godard, who early on in his career had a passion for Marxist values and was convinced of their absolute truth, began to say goodbye to language, to the possibility for human beings to communicate with each other and agree with one another.
Non, je pense
For modern rational thinkers, the human mind has an autonomy, an independence from the outside world. This is why it can calculate the world from afar with the use of conceptual thinking. This means that reality can be reduced to the activity of the mind, and that human beings can always center themselves in the world rather than be alienated from it, to be in despair. For the postmodernist, on the other hand, language cannot be reduced to logic, to mathematics, because words in every language are dependent on one another to have meaning in the first place, rather than independent units of meaning. This means that for them, the abstract conceptual thinking the modernists were using in order to get to the truth with a capital T is a form of self-deception. They argued that language doesn't describe the actual world, but the world in our mind which we cannot get out of. We create our world with the use of language, rather than reveal the truth about the world, which means that the only way we can be free is by creating a new language. But the problem with their approach is that things in the world will continue to exist without the use of any language. This means that reality cannot be reduced to language, whether it is complete as the modernists took it to be, or incomplete as the postmodernists took it to be. Moreover, the essence of a spoken or written language is not only to describe the world, but also to communicate with others. Language is a useful tool. But more importantly, before we speak and write, our experience in the world is always already expressive, linguistic, which means that language cannot be understood exclusively and primarily as an abstract one, but as a way to understand our world, ourselves, and others. In a direct opposition to the modernist optimist narrative, late 20th and early 21st century art either became pessimistic or decadent.
How much is this one if I wanted to buy it?
I don't know, a couple $100,000.
But according to Ian Thomson, the meaning of postmodernity is not a negative reaction to modernity, but a break from it. It is a break from the suppression of the past, the creative, and the unfamiliar in the name of order and harmony.
People who live in this sort of disorder, dangerous creatures, to themselves and others. What do? They try to drag us into their confusion, their chaos.
This means that truth, as Lawrence Hudtaub argues, became more pluralistic and open. It is understood today as non-foundational, meaning there are no ultimate explanations, as non-reductive, meaning it cannot be reduced to one setting, as non-uniformed, meaning different settings of inquiry can overlap, and as non-definitive, meaning it is open to revisions. What kind of world, then, is the postmodern world? A polysemic world, a new and exciting and creative space of meaning that accommodates more ambiguity, since a thing can always show us more than what we see at this moment. Ambiguity is not negative, but a search for as many perspectives as possible. It is different from being ambivalent about the truth, which is the outcome of a rigid way of being. Metaphysical thinking forces one to see the world in terms of two independent opposite concepts. Anything is reduced to one of these concepts, and any contradictions that can threaten their authority are concealed. But those who do notice them become ambivalent. They are not sure what the truth is anymore, which can turn them into skeptics, as existential artists, or pessimists and nihilists, as the anti-modernist artist or the so-called postmodernist artists are. When things are bad or people turn out to be bad, human beings either become idealistic or pessimistic, nihilistic, and apathetic. But for a while now, we haven't been living in a world with competing visions, a dualistic metaphysical worldview in which the good, truth, and the evil, lie, compete with each other, but in a world that discussions about which values and norms are truer and better are being held in the cultural and political arenas. Liberal societies supposedly should promote these discussions, which is one of the reasons why they are better. Instead of crying for the loss of Western ideals and the inability to get access to transcendent truth, or to celebrate the transient and the fictional in defiance to them, contemporary art should open us to more and more meanings, and to celebrate the ambiguous. Art can make new discoveries and show us more layers, aspects, and perspectives our experiences have. And when it does, a fiction, a lie, can't be understood as the opposite of truth, but that which was hidden before and came into light at this moment. This, in return, will afford us more pluralism, since the more open and ambiguous we are, the more possibilities we can curate. And being more pluralistic, rather than reductive, can enrich our knowledge about the world, get us closer together, and help us to restore justice faster and easier. When we see ourselves only as one thing in one time, more cases of injustice can take place, since we put more pressure on ourselves and others to be normal and repress our and their experiences in order to keep things normal. But when we see ourselves in many ways in different times, cases of injustice that happened in the past can be forgiven more easily. More people can have justice, and more issues can be addressed in order to prevent future injustices. Thank you for watching. Remember to subscribe and hit the bell for notifications. And if you like our videos, please support us via our PayPal link.